Serving as Supreme Chancellor of the Galactic Senate in public and Sith Lord Darth Sidious in the shadows, Palpatine was the true mastermind of the Sith Grand Plan. Through his machinations, he was able to manipulate the destruction of the Jedi Order, the fall of the Republic, and the rise of his galactic empire. However, one of Palpatine's most impressive achievements, arguably the most important one, was the manipulation of the Chosen One, Anakin Skywalker, who would one day become Darth Vader. Over the course of 13 years, Palpatine would groom Anakin, shaping him into a Sith apprentice. Due to Anakin's already present inner turmoil, fear, and conflict, Palpatine was able to manipulate him quite easily. How this was done, as well as the intricacies of their relationship, are explained in the canon book Skywalker: A Family at War. When the calm, caring, guiding influence of Shmi and Qui-Gon was gone, two very different individuals stepped into the breach to fill the emotional void in Anakin's life. The first was his new master, Obi-Wan Kenobi. The second was Sheev Palpatine. The Chancellor watched Anakin's journey with detached attentiveness. His exalted position gave Palpatine almost unrestricted political power and unlimited access to the Jedi Masters and their abilities. With a benevolent smile plastered across his wrinkled face, Palpatine could walk into the Jedi Temple at any time, and turn a kindly offer of helping to shape Anakin's future into a command that not even Mace Windu could refuse. Unbeknown to the Galactic Republic and everyone else, Palpatine was secretly a Sith Lord. A cloud of the dark side's making concealed this fact from even the most experienced Jedi Masters, who sensed something nefarious at work but could not trace its source. Thus, Palpatine enjoyed the protection of the Jedi instead of their enmity. Well aware that Anakin had helped end the Trade Federation's blockade and invasion of Naboo, the devious Sith used this knowledge to insert himself into Anakin's life just as the young Padawan was questioning his place among the Jedi. Because no one within the Order, not even Obi-Wan, sensed his true intentions, Palpatine prepared Anakin for a dark future as his Sith apprentice with impunity. Skywalker's skill with a lightsaber and volatile personality made him the ideal candidate. While becoming one of Anakin's closest confidants, the calculating politician schemed to instill a dangerous sense of ambition in the already arrogant boy. As Anakin neared his teenage years, his roiling emotions called for the steady calm of Qui-Gon Jinn. Sheev Palpatine was a willing and welcoming substitute. When he called Anakin's son, the boy felt that he would do anything for him, just for the chance to feel part of a family. Using the seedy underworld of Coruscant as his classroom, Palpatine opened the young man's eyes to the suffering of those dwelling on the planet's lowest levels, far below the glittering cities where Palpatine ruled over the Senate and Anakin studied in the sacred Jedi Temple. Many residents of these gloomy subsurface levels had never even seen sunlight, a tragedy that a boy raised beneath the twin suns of Tatooine couldn't even imagine. Palpatine claimed these expeditions were a way of understanding some of the less fortunate inhabitants of the Republic's core world. In truth, they were ploys, tests, to not only see if Anakin was pliant, but to expose Anakin to the hypocrisies inherent in the Republic that, Palpatine confidently expected, would one day lead him to reject the Jedi Code. Right under the nose of Republic officials, sentient beings were being bought and sold as slaves in this hopeless district, a disturbing reminder of Anakin's own past. Although the young man claimed to rarely think about his childhood enslavement after his induction into the Order, Palpatine saw through the lie and into Anakin's heart, where he still hoped to help his mother and free other slaves, not only on Tatooine, but all across the galaxy. With a benevolent sigh, Palpatine deftly probed Anakin's insecurities while praising the boy in the ways he craved. This was the first, but certainly not the last, time that Palpatine would feed Anakin's ego. Palpatine frequently hailed the young man as the most gifted Jedi he had ever met. To Anakin, Palpatine's praise, pointed questions, and insightful observations seemed to forge a strong connection, a bond that he rarely enjoyed with his fellow Jedi. Bit by bit, Palpatine cunningly stoked the young man's disillusion with the status quo on Coruscant's surface, where prosperity reigned, without a thought to the less fortunate souls below. This fresh way of thinking validated and mirrored many of Anakin's own concerns. He never suspected that Palpatine was quietly clawing at his emotional wounds. In this way, Palpatine forged the first link in this bond between himself and the young man he genially referred to as his boy. He made Anakin promise that he would not disclose what he had seen or learned on the sub-levels when he returned to the temple. It would be their secret. Knowing Anakin's doubts and fears enabled Palpatine to more easily expose the cracks in the boy's will, allowing the darkness in. Palpatine would sometimes confess to being wistfully envious of the predetermined life of a Jedi, when all of his own life had been made up of tough choices. Though Palpatine's words were seemingly kindly meant, to Anakin, the ability to choose his destiny was a freedom he was reluctant to relinquish. He had chosen to walk the Jedi path, but since his acceptance in the Order, every decision had been made for him. And in hindsight, even that first step seemed like a childish choice, made on a whim by an uneducated young slave because a magical man with a weapon made of light had offered him the chance to be free. Intellectually, Anakin knew that he was no prisoner. He could leave the Order at any time. But Palpatine's words struck home. The course of Anakin's life would indeed be predetermined if he remained on the path to become a Jedi Master. While Obi-Wan earnestly believed that being a part of the Jedi Order made him stronger than being an individual, Anakin felt more at ease being one half of a whole, even with all of his skills and talents. Anakin was quickly learning that the life of a peacekeeper was not free. A Jedi was devoted to the Order, and as such had to obey the Jedi Council, even when an individual's personal convictions clashed with their guidance. Far below the surface of Coruscant, Palpatine had surreptitiously exposed a different ideological path to the insecure Jedi. Under the sway of the Supreme Chancellor, skilled in the art of suggestion, Anakin was a more than willing recipient of the older man's insinuations. Anakin, with Obi-Wan's guidance, ultimately resolved to continue on the path toward becoming a Jedi Knight. But most importantly to him, Palpatine had offered him a place by his side once his training was complete. An alternate future, a door to be opened if Anakin desired after he had mastered all the Jedi had to offer. On the surface, Palpatine seemed to be promising the young man the sense of belonging that he searched for. In reality, Palpatine saw Anakin as a powerful tool for his master plan, a new galactic empire with himself as supreme ruler. At the twilight of the Republic, there were around 10,000 Jedi Knights active in the galaxy, though their numbers had thinned as a result of the Clone Wars. When Order 66 was initiated and the Jedi were branded traitors, most of them were killed by their own clone troopers on numerous worlds, with the deadliest blow being dealt by Darth Vader and the 501st at the Jedi Temple. With the slaughter of nearly all of the Jedi that remained within the Temple, the Order was decimated and their knowledge of the past usurped by the Empire. Some Jedi managed to survive the carnage, scattering across the galaxy to hide. As the Empire formed, Darth Vader fostered an obsession with finding and executing those Jedi survivors. As the only thing that remained for him was his duty of serving Darth Sidious and the Galactic Empire, finding remaining Jedi was one of the only tasks that motivated him. However, Sidious, known publicly as Emperor Palpatine, wasn't exactly concerned about any straggling Jedi that had managed to survive the Purge. While he did form the Inquisitorius and assign them the objective of hunting Jedi with Vader, Palpatine did not fear the remaining Jedi and wasn't particularly worried about them himself. This is explained in the Legends novel Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader, when Palpatine and Vader were alerted of clone troopers that had disobeyed Order 66 on Murkana, allowing 3 Jedi to escape. It is important to note that this book was published in 2006, years before the Clone Wars series established that the clones had inhibitor chips in their heads. Originally, the clones were simply instructed to obey every command from Palpatine without question, but some of them were loyal to their Jedi leaders and disobeyed Order 66. Anyway, the story picks up a month after Revenge of the Sith, with Darth Vader speaking to a hologram of Palpatine. As Vader strained to maintain a kneeling posture, he asked his master what orders he had for him. Palpatine asked Vader if he remembered a lesson about the relationship between power and understanding. Vader confirmed that he did, repeating how while the Jedi gained power through understanding, the Sith gained understanding through power. Pleased, Palpatine told him that the lesson would become clearer to him as he continued his training. He assured Vader that he would provide him with the means to increase his power and broaden his understanding of the Force, with the dark side becoming the only companion he needed. Palpatine then informed him that he had heard that a group of clone troopers on Murkana may have deliberately refused to comply with Order 66. Vader had not heard this news. He knew that Order 66 had not been hardwired into the clones by the Kaminoans. Instead, the troopers had been programmed to demonstrate unfailing loyalty to Chancellor Palpatine. A few Jedi were known to have escaped death either by superior skill or accident, but apparently on Murkana, unique events had played out. Vader asked what caused the troopers' insubordination, and Palpatine replied that it was contagion, brought about by fighting alongside the Jedi for 3 years. He instructed Vader to go to Murkana and demonstrate the peril brought about by independent thinking. Vader asked if it was possible that some Jedi had survived as a result of the clones' refusal to obey orders, a question that Palpatine was irritated by. He told Vader that he was not worried about his pathetic former friends, and merely wanted the clone troopers to be punished, as a reminder to all of the clones to remember who they truly served. Vader asked again what should be done about the escaped Jedi, and Palpatine gave him permission to kill any that he did come across. Vader traveled to Murkana, where he slaughtered the entire group of clones that had disobeyed orders, and also killed one of the surviving Jedi. However, the Jedi was able to wound him on the arm, which greatly troubled him and caused him to doubt his powers. Later, Vader returned to Palpatine's medical facility on Coruscant to speak with his master about the mission. Palpatine noticed that Vader was holding immense rage and frustration about something, yet was attempting to hide it. Vader confessed that he had found the surviving Jedi and had killed one while the other 2 escaped. He launched into an angry tirade, blaming Palpatine for his failure on Murkana, insisting that the Jedi wouldn't have escaped if his armored suit didn't restrict him to the point of immobility. Displeased, Palpatine remarked how Vader had failed his mission but was quick to deflect the blame for it. He sternly reiterated to Vader that the Jedi meant nothing to them. He said that even Yoda and Obi-Wan, having both also survived, were not exceptions to that rule either. Palpatine revealed that he was certain dozens of Jedi had escaped with their lives, and that Vader would surely have the pleasure of killing many of them, but the most important thing was that the Jedi Order had been crushed. Palpatine said that the surviving Jedi, hiding on remote worlds and burying their heads in the sand, were merely humbling themselves before the Sith, so he wanted to let them. He told Vader he wanted to leave them alone so they could atone for 1,000 years of their arrogance and self-absorption. When Darth Vader was rebuilt into a cyborg, encased in a suit of life support armor and reborn, he learned from his master that Padmé had died. Palpatine told Vader that he had killed Padmé by his own hand. In his quest to possess his wife and maintain control over life itself, Vader had brought about the very thing he had sought to prevent, losing everything in the process. Yet what remains unclear is how Palpatine knew that Padmé was dead. Assuming that he had spies all over Coruscant, perhaps Palpatine did know that Padmé had left abruptly to find Anakin on Mustafar. But by the time he arrived to recover Vader from the lava bank, both Obi-Wan and Padmé were gone. So what exactly did Palpatine know for certain? How much information did he truly have? There is a popular fan theory that he drained Padmé's life force to keep Vader alive during the reconstruction surgery, but I personally don't buy into that because it's never been stated or supported anywhere in the lore. Instead, for my analysis, I'd like to look at some of the most obvious evidence pertaining to Palpatine's relationship with Anakin. Obviously, Palpatine knew all about Anakin's premonitions of Padmé's death in childbirth. It was the final piece of the puzzle that he used to manipulate Anakin into lusting for the mythical power of the dark side, specifically through the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise. At this point, Palpatine had been mentoring and grooming Anakin for 13 years, and he was also aware of Anakin's nightmares of his mother's death, which came true. Anakin was gifted premonitions through the Force, which always came to pass. This is how I believe Palpatine assumed that Padmé must have been dead after Mustafar. While he was one of the most powerful Sith Lords of all time, and he did have some sort of personal connection with Padmé, perhaps Palpatine was able to sense in the Force that she was dead. However, since Palpatine never had any intention of saving Padmé's life, and he was aware that all of Anakin's visions came true eventually, I think it's more plausible that he simply assumed she had died. This is also supported by the fact that Palpatine didn't know that Padmé had given birth to the Skywalker twins before she died. He simply told Vader she was dead, and it wasn't until the events of Episode 5, 22 years later, that he realized Luke was Anakin's son. So he didn't have all of the information at the end of Revenge of the Sith. He didn't know how Padmé died or where, and he didn't know about the birth of the twins. This is why I believe that he may not have known if Padmé was dead for sure. He simply made an assumption based on Anakin's previous visions, and used her death to push Vader completely into his pain and suffering. Without Padmé, all of Vader's past was destroyed, and he could be reborn as a Sith Lord, fully immersed in the dark side of the Force. When Anakin Skywalker lost his right arm at the elbow during his duel with Count Dooku, the injury would alter not only the way he thought of himself, but the way that others viewed him. Canonically, Anakin despised his mechanical arm during the early days of the Clone Wars, and even the Jedi Council noticed how the loss of his limb changed his behavior, causing them to wonder if he had also lost his humanity on Geonosis. One interesting detail provided in the novelization of Revenge of the Sith reveals that Chancellor Palpatine actually loved Anakin's mechanical arm for several reasons, which he explained to his apprentice Count Dooku during the Battle of Coruscant. As Dooku and Palpatine observed Obi-Wan and Anakin fighting their way through the Invisible Hand, Dooku thought of the supposed plan in place, having no idea that he was truly about to be killed and replaced. Dooku believed that he would allow himself to be captured by Anakin, and spend the rest of the Clone Wars in comfortable captivity until he emerged to lead the new Sith army of the Galactic Empire. Dooku was instructed by Palpatine to kill Obi-Wan in the coming duel, as a means of pushing Anakin's unstable emotions fully into darkness and convert him to the side of the Sith. Dooku thought that Anakin was being recruited simply to serve as one of their minions in the future Empire, yet he had several reservations. Dooku was uncertain if Anakin was truly an ally that they wanted, given his raw power in the Force and how dangerous it made him. He wanted to simply kill Anakin instead. Dooku also commented in disgust that Anakin's mechanical arm was revolting, making the young Jedi not even entirely human. He believed that a true gentleman would have simply learned to wield a lightsaber one-handed, instead of relying on a mechanical prosthesis. In his arrogance and smug sense of superiority, Dooku questioned how they could justify associating with a man that was practically part droid, comparing Anakin to General Grievous. Palpatine retorted that Anakin's mechanical arm made him even better, stating that the arm was a permanent symbol of the sacrifices that Anakin had made in the name of peace and justice. It was a badge of heroism that Anakin had to publicly display for the rest of his life, and Palpatine knew that no one could ever look at Anakin and question his honor, his courage, or his integrity. Practically in awe, Palpatine told Dooku that Anakin was perfect just the way he was, and the only question about Anakin's Sith potential was whether or not he could break free of the limitations imposed by Jedi indoctrination. So I think that this explanation by Palpatine is very interesting because it gives hints as to what Palpatine's plans were for Anakin or Darth Vader before Vader was defeated on Mustafar and encased in his suit of armor. It seems that Palpatine wanted Vader to be a strong symbol of the Empire, displaying honor and bravery with his mechanical arm for propaganda purposes. It also adds depth to how disappointed Palpatine was when Vader was defeated on Mustafar and needed to rely on his armor for the rest of his life. I just think that it's really cool, and it also shows how much Palpatine wanted Anakin as his apprentice. Like any conflict, the Clone Wars didn't come out of nowhere. Its causes dated back more than a century, and included an age-old problem for the Republic: the divisions between the galaxy's inner and outer regions. In 124 BBY, the Senate approved two significant and related pieces of legislation. The Outer Rim territories were declared a free trade zone and exempted from the sometimes oppressive taxes levied by systems, sectors, and regions. Portions of the Mid-Rim later received a similar exemption. And the definition of functional constituencies entitled to representation in the Senate, regardless of geography, was extended to guilds and corporations. Both acts benefited the shipping cartel known as the Trade Federation, but that wasn't their primary aim. The power of local despots and fear of pirates and slavers had strangled trade and stifled economic production in the Rim worlds, breeding political isolation. By acting, the Senate hoped to jumpstart commerce in the Mid and Outer Rim and forge ties between these outlying areas and the rest of the galaxy. How to solve this problem was the subject of considerable debate in the Senate. One faction, generally called the militarists, though many objected to that name, argued that central authority was the best answer, and called for the Republic to break with the Ruusan reformations and once more combine its scattered planetary and sector militaries into a standing army and navy. But others feared renewed militarism, arguing that with the right incentives, the galaxy's private sector would open up trade, which would in turn spur demands for political freedom and knit the galaxy back together. The Senate underestimated the power of the Trade Federation, however. The cartel moved ruthlessly and efficiently into the Rim, striking hard bargains with impoverished systems and sectors that did far more to benefit the Federation than they did to stimulate economic growth. The Trade Federation also took full advantage of the fine print of the bylaws governing functional constituencies, constructing trade agreements so that first systems and later whole sectors handed over their votes in the Senate to the Federation. Within generations, the Trade Federation commanded sufficient Senate votes to hamper its competitors and tie up grievances against it in courts and commissions. Some in the core felt the Trade Federation deserved its gains. Its scouts had blazed countless new hyperspace routes into the Rim, and with the cartel's backing, planetary security forces had routed pirates and bandits from a number of important space lanes. But many in the Rim didn't agree. They decried the group's bare-knuckles negotiations, bemoaned the lack of real commercial competition, and resented the deals that had robbed them of representation. By 52 BBY, when a new senator arrived on Coruscant to represent Naboo and the Chamel sector, a resistance group, the Nebula Front, had emerged, vowing to thwart the Trade Federation by any means necessary. The Front's list of grievances won some sympathy in the Senate, but most senators feared its penchant for violence and the possibility that it might become a separatist movement in the Rim. And though few senators admitted this openly, they also feared the growing power of the Trade Federation and its allies, such as the Corporate Alliance and the Intergalactic Banking Clan. The new Naboo senator, Palpatine, was not the unassuming figure he seemed. In reality, he was Darth Sidious, the secret heir to the Sith traditions. And over the next 2 decades, he would exploit the divisions between the core and the Rim and manipulate the Trade Federation and its enemies until the galaxy stood poised on the verge of the war that would destroy the Republic. Sidious was the puppet master of the Stark Hyperspace War, which erupted in 44 BBY when the piratical entrepreneur Aiko Stark began raiding Trade Federation shipments of Bacta and reselling it for less than what the Federation charged its captive markets. Senator Finis Valorum attempted to end the crisis with a diplomatic summit at Troikin, but the situation exploded into war when Stark tried to take the negotiators hostage. Meanwhile, Iriadu's militarist senator, Ranulph Tarkin, had assembled a battle fleet and sped to Troikin to smash Stark's forces. Tarkin's fleet was decimated by a Navicomputer virus uploaded to its ships by Stark, and the Iriadu strongman died battling Stark's forces. Stark defected to the Republic and helped end the crisis in return for amnesty, while the Trade Federation agreed to lend its fighters to a Jedi rescue mission. The crisis passed, but both the Trade Federation and the Republic had been weakened and radicalized. The Bacta thefts were a ruse cooked up between Stark and the Trade Federation's viceroy. After the crisis, the Trade Federation intensified demands that it be allowed to beef up its security forces to protect its freighters in the Rim. The powerful Tarkin family backed Valorum for Chancellor and saw the new Chancellor declare Ranulph Tarkin the hero of Troikin, a gesture that won new backing for militarism. The militarists pushed through authorization for a new fleet of dreadnoughts, and even senators who wouldn't support such efforts called for greater control of outlying sectors and commerce. The Sith Lord Sidious continued manipulating events during Valorum's 2 terms as Chancellor. As Palpatine, he worked his way into the Chancellor's inner circle. As Sidious, he declared himself to several high-ranking Nemoidians in the Trade Federation ranks and helped the cartel strike deals with a number of key Rim worlds, giving it even more power in the Senate. And he constantly tested the Republic and the Jedi. Shortly after the Stark incident, he pushed an Outer Rim warlord, Kol Horos Mustag Olis, into building an army of battle droids, an army that had to be defeated by the Jedi in the absence of military forces that could face them. In 33 BBY, he stirred up the Yinkori Uprising, which defeated a species Sidious feared, killed Jedi, renewed calls for a standing military, and made Valorum look ineffective. Soon after that, Sidious launched his master plan amid growing violence between the Trade Federation and the Nebula Front. Palpatine convinced Valorum to propose a tax on the Outer Rim trade routes, which would undo the tax advantages enjoyed by the Trade Federation, as well as the Corporate Alliance and the Intergalactic Banking Clan. In return, he said with apparent reluctance, the Trade Federation would have to be allowed to take whatever steps it deemed necessary to protect its vessels. Valorum, not seeing an alternative, took Palpatine's advice, but his speeches to the Senate were harshly critical of the Trade Federation's policies. His tone boosted anti-Federation feeling and the militarist camp. The repeal of the free trade zones would unite the Trade Federation, the Alliance, and the IGBC, three key members of the future Confederacy of Independent Systems. Sidious's goal was the creation of a Trade Federation droid army subject to his wishes, but he had a problem. The cartel's leaders were reluctant to give up their tax status and spend countless credits on defense. Sidious manipulated Valorum into holding a summit about the issues on Iriadu. There, he made it look like Valorum had diverted billions of credit to a family-owned business and arranged the assassination of 4 members of the Trade Federation who'd resisted the bargain he'd arranged. Sidious was pleased. Valorum had been weakened, the militarist camp was gaining adherents in the Senate, suspicions were rising between the core and the Rim, and the Trade Federation was now dominated by Nemoidians in thrall to him. Sidious then told Viceroy Newt Gunray it was time to test his army with a political protest, a blockade of a world that had worked against the Trade Federation's interests. Gunray thought of Iriadu, but Sidious had another spot in mind, Palpatine's homeworld of Naboo. A Sith saying has it that luck is the remnant of manipulation. As Sidious arranged his incident at Naboo, the wisdom of this saying was proven to him. Through a disciple, the disillusioned Jedi Dooku, Sidious learned the Jedi Master SIDIOUS had secretly placed an order for a massive clone army with the renegade geneticists of Kamino. Sidious intended for the Republic to rearm, but now wasn't the time, and the Jedi Master who'd foreseen the rise of the Sith could ruin his plans. To prove himself to Sidious, Dooku killed SIDIOUS, erased all trace of Kamino from the Jedi archives, and left the order. Now, the clone army would be Sidious's to command. All Sidious and Dooku needed was a suitable prime clone. When seemingly defeated by Mace Windu, relying on his manipulation of Anakin to finally come to fruition, Palpatine unleashed an attack of Sith lightning, which was redirected back at him. The lightning ravaged his body, forever altering his physical appearance and leaving his face deformed. Recently, someone commented on a video and asked me to explain this, and I thought it was worthy of its own video. It does seem confusing as to why Palpatine would allow his attack to rebound back at him, leaving him scarred for the rest of his life. However, I believe that I can pull together lore from different books to explain why this happened and why Palpatine actually liked it. The novelization of Revenge of the Sith provides some interesting details during this scene. As Palpatine unleashed his lightning and Mace blocked it with his saber, sending the lightning directly back at its source, Palpatine made no effort to cease his attack. Instead, the lightning only intensified as the pain fueled his power in the dark side. As he pleaded with Anakin to help him, Palpatine was actually using the lightning to manipulate Anakin even further. Trying to make himself appear weak as though he needed help, Palpatine allowed the lightning to deform him before Anakin's eyes in order to convince Anakin that Mace was killing him. It was all a ploy, a price that Palpatine willingly paid in order to finally turn Anakin to the dark side. In the novelization, after Mace Windu was killed, Anakin watched Palpatine admire his new face in the mirror, and was horrified to see that Palpatine simply shrugged at his deformed appearance. Palpatine stated that the mask became the man, and that although he would miss the face of Palpatine, the face of Sidious would serve its purpose too. This was no doubt in reference to him appealing to the Senate later in the movie, where he claimed that the Jedi's attempt to assassinate him had left him deformed. In the canon book Stories of Jedi and Sith, it's also stated that Palpatine believed that his deformed face was a gift from the dark side. So that explains why Palpatine allowed it to happen, but not necessarily why the lightning deformed him in such a way. In order to explain that, I'm actually going to reference the Legends book Revan, which has some great lore surrounding the dark side and its powers. The dark side itself is pure corruption of both the mind and the body. While it can offer power quickly and easily, it is merely a trap as you are consumed by it. In the Revan book, this is explained through the character of Darth Nihilus, who appeared to be much older than she actually was. It's stated that by bending the Force to one's will through the dark side, there is a cost that must be paid, with the most powerful dark rituals demanding a great toll. A lifetime spent delving into the ancient secrets of the Sith had drained Nihilus of her youth, withering her physical appearance due to the immense power of the dark side. This is basically what happened to Palpatine and why he became deformed. Mace had created a loop using Vapad to deflect the lightning, and the pain of his own lightning only increased Palpatine's power, which scarred him even more. The power of the dark side was so immense that his physical form could not handle it, and that's why he became deformed. It's also why Palpatine believed that it was his true face, as Darth Sidious was his true self. After his duel with Luke on Bespin, Darth Vader embarked on a quest to discover the truth of Padmé's death and learn how his son was hidden from him. The personal mission led him to Tatooine, Naboo, and finally Polis Massa, the medical facility where Padmé gave birth and died. While Vader did receive answers, watching footage of Padmé's death and hearing her claim there was still good within him only served to awaken his inner conflict. For the first time in over 20 years, Vader questioned his allegiance to the Sith as his soul was fractured. In the 2020 Darth Vader comic series, when Vader returned to face the Emperor, he was subjected to the full power of his master's wrath. Palpatine recited the old mantra that fear led to anger, anger led to hate, and hate led to strength. However, he stated that Vader had merely wallowed in grief. Thus, his apprentice needed to start over with fear. Attacking Vader with an immensely powerful blast of Sith lightning, Palpatine was pleased that Vader still defended himself. When Vader asked his master why he was attacking him, Mas Amida recalled Vader's actions on his personal mission. Vader had been sent to bring Luke to the dark side, but let him escape on Cloud City. Then he was summoned to report to the Emperor, but he instead left on his own mission. Vader discovered a rebel cell led by one of Padmé's former handmaidens, whom he should have slaughtered. Instead, Vader also let her escape. Mas Amida stated that Vader's actions were at best failure and at worst treason. The Empire killed traitors. They commanded the Emperor's royal guards to attack Vader. As they began to fight, Palpatine took Vader's saber with the Force, commanding him to continue. The guards used their staffs to electrocute Vader's armor as he screamed in agony, yet he managed to fight them off. Vader gripped both guards and Mas Amida with the Force, choking them, which pleased Palpatine but was still not enough. Palpatine grasped Vader in a Force choke, taunting him, asking him how it felt to be so weak. He continued, remarking how Vader was supposed to be the Chosen One, destined to bring balance to the Force. But who chose the Chosen One, and why could they not choose another? Palpatine told him that he was simply a tool that could be discarded when it no longer functioned. Vader, in agony, said that Palpatine had lied about Padmé's death, which elicited a laugh from his master. Palpatine replied that Vader had proved his point. He said it was Vader's fear of losing Padmé that brought him to his side, and he had turned Vader's weakness into unimaginable strength. But now that weakness had returned to threaten everything that Vader had gained. Palpatine said he would teach Vader fear again to restore his power. Crushing his left arm and both of his legs, the very limbs he had lost on Mustafar, Palpatine told Vader to forget Padmé, forget Luke, forget everything except his Emperor, and shattered the 3 limbs as Vader screamed in pain. Vader fell to the floor in a heap, mangled and broken, as Palpatine said that he needed to find himself again. Vader needed to relearn the primacy of power above all else, or he would die. Traveling to Mustafar, Palpatine had Vader deposited onto the very same lava bank he had rescued him from years before, the exact same spot that Obi-Wan had left him to die. As Vader's legs caught fire from the heat of the lava river, exactly as they had years before, Palpatine said that the last time Vader was broken, he found him and rebuilt him. But this time he needed to rebuild himself, using nothing but his own strength. As Vader screamed, Palpatine tossed his apprentice's saber onto the black sand, warning him that he was not allowed to use the Force at all during this entire lesson. As Palpatine left aboard his shuttle, Vader's vision flashed to his view of Obi-Wan walking away from him so many years before. Crawling using only his remaining arm, Vader inched closer to his saber, remembering how he had killed Obi-Wan on the Death Star and imagining killing Palpatine in the same way. Except Palpatine did not die when Vader struck him. Instead, he laughed in Vader's face. Gripping his lightsaber, Vader summoned strength from his pain and began crawling up the lava bank. Of course, that would not be enough to destroy Darth Vader. In The Empire Strikes Back, Emperor Palpatine informs Darth Vader that he knows Luke is the son of Anakin Skywalker. How he learned that is left pretty ambiguous in the film, as he only cites a disturbance in the Force. In canon, Darth Vader already knew that Luke was his son, as Boba Fett had told him much earlier after learning Luke's last name. Vader only pretended to be surprised when Palpatine confronted him. In the canon book The Empire Strikes Back from a Certain Point of View, it's finally revealed how Palpatine learned this information, as he experienced a vision of Luke through the Force. Palpatine felt a great disturbance in the Force. It erupted, clear as a ship emerging from hyperspace, sending shockwaves through the dark and the light. Sitting in a dark chamber beneath the Imperial Palace, a place he used to deepen his mastery over the dark side, he closed his eyes, seeing into the Force itself. He felt the sheer violence of the Force's infinite currents, something only a true Sith Lord would dare to invite in. Through the dark side, it was possible to bend the Force to one's will, to exploit its potential into the most powerful path. But when a strong disturbance roared, the Force shook free for only a moment. But Palpatine did not feel fear. All he cared about was the source of the disturbance. The last time he had felt something of this magnitude was when the Death Star had been destroyed, and he sensed a rebel pilot, strong in the Force, who pulled the trigger and destroyed the space station. That pilot's connection to the Force remained a mystery to him, until a moment ago. Palpatine gave into the chaos of the disturbance, and the Force revealed itself to him through a vision. He was inside his office on Coruscant and saw the decapitated bodies of his royal guards on the floor. Next to them, a figure stood, with power emanating from its very breath. Palpatine could see that the figure was a young man, holding a red lightsaber. The figure approached the large chair at the end of the office, and Palpatine watched an image of himself rise from it. The two figures met. This vision felt different than anything he had ever experienced, and the steps of the hooded young man echoed through the Force itself. Palpatine watched as the young man suddenly raised his hand and began to choke the other Emperor, and he watched himself retaliate with Sith lightning. However, the Emperor of the Vision was being completely overpowered, and Palpatine was intrigued as he observed. Then the Emperor fell to his knees as the young man choked him with the Force, and then impaled him with his red-bladed saber. The Emperor fell to the floor, dead, as the young man turned away. Palpatine knew he should have been frightened at a vision of his own death, but he only felt mild curiosity. Of course, another ambitious would-be conqueror existed. That was the way of the Sith. The young man approached Palpatine as though he could see him, removing his hood and revealing his face. Another voice came from the very spot that Palpatine was experiencing the vision, telling the boy that he had done well. Palpatine realized that he was seeing a dream through the eyes of the dreamer, and this was the great disturbance in the Force. The new voice was a strong voice that Palpatine had not heard in decades, the voice of Anakin Skywalker. It didn't surprise Palpatine to discover that Lord Vader was dreaming of overthrowing him. All Sith did. But mere dreams were usually not powerful enough to cause such a disturbance in the Force, and this one almost felt like a prophecy. Palpatine knew that there was something more to this, something powerful and passionate. The vision shifted, and now the young man stood observing a fleet of Star Destroyers. And Lord Vader began to move, walking through the dream as Palpatine watched through his eyes, and he realized that Vader appeared as Anakin had once been, without his armor. Palpatine realized that this was Vader's dream of everything he wanted, everything he hoped for, and everything he had lost. Then, Vader turned to observe another figure, and Palpatine already knew who it was. If this was Vader's delusion, there was only one thing that would make it complete. It was Padmé Amidala, who moved toward Vader and the young man. The young man turned, calling Vader and Padmé father and mother. And suddenly, Palpatine saw things for what they were. This disturbance was an explosion of emotion that ripped through the Force itself. He wondered how long had Vader known that he had a son. Vader spoke the name Luke in the vision, and Palpatine watched the vision shift until only Vader and this Luke remained. Luke Skywalker. Palpatine then finally let himself leave the vision. He now understood the truth of Vader's obsession with finding the rebel pilot who had destroyed the Death Star. Vader was hopelessly searching for his son. Palpatine decided that he would indeed allow Vader to find his son, and then he would propel Luke to the true potential of his bloodline, over Vader's final breath. He wondered how much Vader truly knew. How far had he gone to hide his betrayal? Palpatine tapped a button on the arm of his chair, ordering a commander to summon Lord Vader, for they had important matters to discuss. Seeing an opportunity like no other, Palpatine spent 13 years grooming and manipulating Anakin Skywalker, plotting to turn the Chosen One into his Sith apprentice. Up until the day Order 66 was declared, all of Palpatine's plans were executed flawlessly, and Anakin became Darth Vader. But the one thing that Palpatine did not foresee was Vader's defeat and immolation on Mustafar, which severely crippled him and limited his potential. Palpatine was incredibly disappointed in his new apprentice's failure, which is elaborated on in the Legends book Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader. Swiveling in his throne, Sidious gazed at his beloved Sith statues. As some Jedi had feared from the start, Anakin had been ripe for conversion when Qui-Gon Jinn had first brought him to the temple, and for well over a decade all of Sidious's plans for the boy had unfolded without incident. But even Sidious hadn't foreseen Anakin's defeat by Obi-Wan Kenobi on Mustafar. Anakin had still been between worlds then, and vulnerable. The failure to defeat his former master had worked to prolong that vulnerability. Sidious recalled the desperate return trip to Coruscant, recalled using all his powers and all the potions and devices contained in his medkit to minister to Anakin's hopelessly blistered body and truncated limbs. He recalled thinking, what if Anakin should die? How many years would he have to search for an apprentice even half as powerful in the Force, let alone one created by the Force itself to restore balance, by allowing the dark side to percolate fully to the surface after a millennium of being stifled? None would be found. Sidious would have had to discover a way to compel midichlorians to do his bidding, and bring into being one as powerful as Anakin. As it was, Sidious and a host of medical droids had merely restored Anakin to life, which, while no small feat, was a far cry from returning someone from death. For thousands of years, the ability to survive death had been pursued by Sith and Jedi alike, and no one had been successful at discovering the secret. Beings had been saved from dying, but no one had cheated death. The most powerful of the ancient Sith Lords had known the secret, but it had been lost, or rather misplaced. Now that the galaxy was his to rule, there was nothing to prevent Sidious, too, from unlocking that mystery. Then he and his crippled apprentice might hold sway over the galaxy for 10,000 years and live eternally, if they didn't kill each other first. In large part because Padmé Amidala had died. Not for the first time, Sidious wondered what might have happened had Anakin not killed Padmé on Mustafar. For all she loved him, she never would have understood or forgiven Anakin's actions at the Jedi Temple. In fact, that was one of the reasons Sidious had sent him there. Anakin's presence was essential in order to cement his allegiance to the Sith, and, more importantly, to seal Padmé's fate. Even if she had survived Mustafar, their love would have died. Padmé might even have lost the will to live, and their child would have become Sidious's and Vader's to raise. Might that child have been the first member of a new Sith order of thousands or millions? Hardly. The idea of a Sith order was a corruption of the intent of the ancient Dark Lords. Fortunately, Darth Bane had understood that, and had insisted that only in rare instances should there exist more than two lords, master and apprentice, at any given time. But two were necessary for the perpetuation of the Sith order. And so it fell to Sidious to complete Vader's convalescence. As Emperor Palpatine, he had no need to reveal his Sith training and mastery to anyone, and for the moment, Vader was his Crimson Blade. Let the galaxy think what it would of Vader. Fallen Jedi, surfaced Sith, political enforcer. It scarcely mattered, since fear would ultimately bring and keep everyone in line. Yes, Vader was not precisely what he had bargained for. Vader's legs and arms were artificial, but he would never be able to summon lightning or leap about like the Jedi had been fond of doing. His dark side training was just beginning. But Sith power resided not in the flesh, but in the will. Self-restraint was praised by the Jedi only because they didn't know the power of the dark side. Vader's real weaknesses were psychological rather than physical, and for Vader to overcome them, he would need to be driven deeper into himself, to confront all his choices and his disappointments. Powered by treachery, the Sith master-apprentice relationship was always a dangerous game. Trust was encouraged even while being sabotaged. Loyalty was demanded even while betrayal was prized. Suspicion was nourished even while honesty was praised. In some sense, it was survival of the fittest. Fundamental to Vader's growth was the desire to overthrow his master. Had Vader killed Obi-Wan on Mustafar, he might have attempted to kill Sidious as well. In fact, Sidious would have been surprised if Anakin hadn't made an attempt. Now, however, incapable of so much as breathing on his own, Vader could not rise to the challenge, and Sidious understood that he would need to do everything in his power to shake Vader out of his despair, and reawaken the incredible power within him, even at Sidious's own peril. Perhaps the greatest Sith Lord of all time, Darth Sidious, also known as Palpatine, was the Dark Lord who oversaw the culmination of the Sith Grand Plan. Completing plans that had been in motion for 1,000 years since Darth Bane reinvented the Sith Order under the rule of two, Palpatine considered himself to be the prophesied Sithari. In Legends, Palpatine succeeded in cheating death, transferring his consciousness into a clone body on the planet Biss after the Battle of Endor. In the encyclopedia Jedi vs. Sith, The Essential Guide to the Force, there is a passage written by Palpatine himself, where he reflects on his past apprentices Darth Maul, Count Dooku, and Darth Vader. The relationship between a Sith master and apprentice is far more powerful than any other teacher and student, a duality greater than the fundamental entities of mind and matter. It is vital that neither believes there is greater strength in a single Sith Lord, or in an order that exceeds two. Because you are not yet a master yourself, you might assume that it is the master's duty to bestow all of his knowledge of the dark side to his apprentice. You could not be more mistaken. It is the apprentice's duty to learn all that he can from the master, and the master's right to refrain from revealing all of his secrets. My own master, Darth Plagueis, made the grave error of teaching me too much, at which point he became unnecessary. Choosing an apprentice can be a strenuous endeavor. The most important thing to remember is that the apprentice's purpose is to serve the master. Only when you consider how few beings are worthy of becoming a Sith Lord can you begin to understand the enormity of your responsibility. You want someone capable of carrying out your orders, but not someone who has every intention of killing you before you can accomplish your goals. And you can expect that your apprentice will come to want your life, for it is only natural for the apprentice to aspire for more. An apprentice should be ambitious, but if your own ambition is to live, you must be mindful. Choose someone as a successor and you will inevitably be succeeded. Choose someone hungrier and you will be devoured. Choose someone quicker and you won't dodge the blade at your back. Choose someone with more patience and you won't block the blade at your throat. Choose someone more devious and you'll hold the blade that kills you. Choose someone more clever and you'll never know your end. Despite these cautions, an apprentice is essential. A master without an apprentice is a master of nothing. I took inspiration from the Jedi tradition of indoctrinating Force-sensitive infants when I selected one apprentice, whom I named Darth Maul. I took him from his homeworld, Iridonia, and raised him as I would construct the perfect weapon. I trained him in numerous exotic and forbidden martial arts, disciplined him constantly, and personally applied the Sith tattoos that were evidence of his complete dedication to the dark side. Maul had but one reason for being: to exact vengeance against the Jedi Order for the decimation of the Sith ranks. Oh, how he dreamed of burning the Jedi Temple to the ground. I know, for I gave him that dream repeatedly. Maul completed his basic training several years before the Battle of Naboo, and served me well as an assassin and extension of my will. As loyal as he was, I made no effort to caution him when I first saw his death in a duel with the Jedi on Naboo, for by that time the Jedi had already become aware of their chosen one, the remarkably powerful Anakin Skywalker. I had foreseen that young Skywalker would eventually become my apprentice, but that I would have to wait for him. Ultimately, Maul was nothing more than a tool, and despite his sense of purpose, he never realized that it was not his destiny to raise the Jedi Temple. But by slaying Qui-Gon Jinn before he was in turn defeated by Obi-Wan Kenobi, that tool accomplished a different goal. He rattled the Jedi Order's long complacent attitude regarding the existence of the Sith, making many of them nervous and paranoid, and also created a path for Skywalker to be trained in the ways of the Force by Kenobi, a Jedi with relatively limited experience. To those who do not know me, my actions, or apparent inactions, during the Battle of Naboo may have seemed less like a calculated risk than a gross exercise in wishful thinking. I'm sure you will agree that such suggestions are insulting. No, I knew exactly what I was doing when I allowed events to happen as they did. Why train an apprentice to hate the Jedi when the Jedi can train him for you? I did not wait long to appoint my next apprentice. I had had my eye on the Jedi Master Count Dooku for quite some time, and had even met with him on several occasions when I was a senator to discuss his ideologies. Dooku's infinite charm, impeccable manners, and powers of influence were precisely what I needed to accelerate my goals for galactic conquest. Despite his many years of service to the Jedi Order, it was refreshingly easy to convince him to ally with me. Of course, it helped that I knew of his slight fascination with Sith holocrons when he was but a Jedi Padawan, and so Dooku became Darth Tyrannus. Both Tyrannus and his alter ego accomplished a great deal in the years that he served me. As Tyrannus, he arranged for the creation of the clone army for the Republic, and as Dooku, he became the leader of the Republic's opposition, the Confederacy of Independent Systems. Tyrannus also enlisted Asajj Ventress to our cause. If ever there were a Sith aspirant, it was Ventress, but her hatred of the Jedi was so intense that it frequently blinded her and made her tactless. She may have deluded herself into believing she was Tyrannus' apprentice, especially after he bestowed upon her a pair of lightsabers. Perhaps Ventress deserved them, for she was an occasionally capable warrior, nothing more or less. But as with Darth Maul, Darth Tyrannus' tenure was not indefinite. When the opportunity finally came for Anakin Skywalker to take his place beside me, it was imperative to end Tyrannus' apprenticeship. Skywalker himself did the deed, which came as a complete surprise to Tyrannus. It still amuses me that the old scoundrel never foresaw that my goals might hinge on his death. And so Anakin Skywalker, hopelessly entranced by my promise to show him the secrets of eternal life, became Darth Vader. Although he fulfilled Maul's dream of bringing down the Jedi Temple and also killed the leaders of the Confederacy, I regret Vader disappointed me early on when he allowed himself to be mutilated by Kenobi. Yes, Vader remained strong in the Force, but strong enough to succeed me? Never. Granted, he was strong enough to kill me, but that only lasted for so long. It has been 6 years since the Battle of Endor. As leader of my dark side adepts, military executor SIDIOUS has been most loyal and is commended for reviving me here on Biss. But for all his usefulness, SIDIOUS is only a moderate Force sensitive, a capable errand boy but hardly the stuff of a Sith apprentice. No, it is only appropriate that my next apprentice must be someone with more unique qualities. It must be Luke Skywalker or his kin. Seeing the final key that would allow him to complete Anakin Skywalker's conversion to the dark side of the Force, Palpatine used Anakin's visions of Padmé's death to manipulate him into betraying the Jedi and swearing allegiance to the Sith. Using the legend of the mysterious Darth Plagueis, Palpatine convinced Anakin that the secret of immortality lay with him. But in truth, Palpatine had no such knowledge, and he never intended to save Padmé from an inevitable death, as Anakin's premonitions always came true. Padmé's death at Anakin's own hand shook the young Sith Lord to his core, drowning him in grief, which complicated his Sith apprenticeship. In the Legends book Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader, Palpatine's thoughts on Padmé's death are revealed as he contemplated Vader's transformation into a Sith Lord. Palpatine had pondered the secret of immortality and how it had been lost to time along with the deaths of past Sith. As the Emperor of the Galaxy, there was nothing to stop him from rediscovering the path to immortality, which would allow he and Vader to rule eternally, if they didn't kill each other first. He knew there was conflict between them mostly because Padmé had died. Palpatine had deliberately brought her and Anakin together 3 years earlier, both to rid the Senate of her vote against the Military Creation Act and to bring temptation into Anakin's path. When he had learned that Anakin had secretly married Padmé from his spies on Naboo, Palpatine knew for certain that Anakin's attachment to Padmé would supply the means for completing his conversion to the dark side. Anakin's fears for her, in actuality and in visions, had been heightened by keeping the two of them far from each other. Palpatine intentionally sent Anakin on missions to the Outer Rim during the Clone Wars so that his concern for Padmé would worsen. His promise to save Padmé from death was merely an exaggeration that was necessary to turn Anakin away from the thinking of the Jedi, forcing him to consider using the dark side as a source of power. Palpatine wondered what might have happened if Anakin had not killed Padmé on Mustafar. For all she loved him, she never would have understood or forgiven Anakin's actions at the Jedi Temple. In fact, that was one of the reasons Palpatine had sent him there to destroy the Jedi. The clone troopers alone could have dealt with the instructors and the younglings, but Anakin's presence was essential in order to cement his allegiance to the Sith, and, more importantly, to seal Padmé's fate. Even if she had survived Mustafar, their love would have certainly died. Now, after her death, it was Palpatine's task to complete Vader's convalescence. He knew that he needed to do everything in his power to shake Vader out of his despair, teach him to forget Padmé, and reawaken the incredible power within him. The duel between Grandmaster Yoda and Darth Sidious was not only a clash of nature between the personifications of the light and dark sides of the Force, it was one of the most pivotal conflicts during the destruction of the Jedi Order and the fall of the Republic. Yoda was the leader of the Jedi Order for hundreds of years, an absolute servant to the light side, yet he had seemingly led the Jedi to their doom. Sidious, also known as the newly appointed Emperor Palpatine, was the reigning Sith Master in Darth Bane's line of Dark Lords. He had orchestrated not only his political ascension to Supreme Chancellor, but the conflict of the Clone Wars and the means to finally destroy the Jedi Order. Their duel within the Senate Chamber was a meeting of incredible powers not only in lightsaber combat, but in the Force. In the novelization of Revenge of the Sith, Yoda's thoughts and feelings are explained as he battled Palpatine, revealing some shocking details that really flesh out his character. Before confronting Palpatine in his office, Yoda waited in a nearby vent shaft and meditated. He knew that sometimes the large convocation chamber of the Galactic Senate was referred to as the Senate Arena, and he thought that nickname would be particularly accurate in a few moments. He stretched his muscles, rising from his meditation, and he knew that this was now his time. 900 years of study and training, of teaching and meditation, all now focused and refined and resolved into this single moment. The sole purpose of his vast span of existence had been to prepare him to enter the heart of darkness and bring his light against it. With reverence, with gratitude for the Force, without fear and without anger, Yoda went forth to war. As he entered Palpatine's office, Yoda could feel the truth of himself within the Force as he prepared to confront the Dark Lord. He was not simply a small physical being clad in robes. He was a pure fountain of light inside the Force itself. Yoda told Palpatine that he pitied his new apprentice, Darth Vader, since the young Sith Lord was about to lose his master. Palpatine joyfully greeted Yoda, wishing him a happy Empire Day, to which the old Jedi Master replied that neither he nor the murderer he called Vader would find today happy at all. Palpatine then realized that the disturbance of danger he had sensed in the Force must be a Jedi that Yoda had sent to kill Vader on Mustafar, and he guessed that it must have been Obi-Wan Kenobi. Yoda did not confirm that, and told Palpatine that it was already enough for him to know his own destroyer. As they came to meet each other, Palpatine assured him that even a fraction of the dark side was more power than the arrogance of the Jedi could even conceive, and by living in the light, the Jedi had never seen the depth of the darkness until now. As light and shadow met, the battle was on. Their duel quickly rose into the Senate arena. transcending a simple personal conflict. Their fight was much different than Obi-Wan and Anakin's on Mustafar. This duel was not about Palpatine fighting Yoda. It was about the Lord of the Sith fighting the Master of all Jedi, 1,000 years of hidden Sith plans unfolding against the glory of the Jedi Order. As their lightsaber blades met, it was much more than one of them against the other. It became even more than the Sith against the Jedi. Their duel was the expression of the fundamental conflict of the universe itself, light against dark. Soon there came a turning point in the battle between light and dark. As the duel shifted even more upwards and Palpatine sent delegation pods catapulting towards Yoda, the old Jedi Master sensed a revelation. He was the supreme avatar of the light, and he resolved into the lineage of the Jedi, and that lineage refined into the single Jedi that was him, and Yoda found himself completely alone against the darkness. As Palpatine unleashed his lightning upon Yoda, and Yoda absorbed its power, his vision finally pierced the darkness that had clouded the Force for so many years, and he saw the truth. He realized that he, the Grand Master of the Jedi Order, the fiercest, most devastatingly powerful foe that the Dark had ever known, could not win. He never could have. He had lost before he started. He had lost before he was born. Yoda saw that in their 1,000 years of hidden exile, the Sith had grown. They had adapted, studying every aspect of not only the Force but of the Jedi, in preparation for this exact day. The Sith had remade themselves and become new, while the Jedi had not. The Jedi had spent the last millennium training to refight the last war. The new Sith could not be destroyed with a lightsaber. They could not be burned away by any torch of the Force. The brighter Yoda's light, the darker the Sith's shadow. He knew at that instant that this sudden insight held the hope of the galaxy, and that if he fell against Palpatine there, that hope would die with him. He needed to ensure that he survived, because the future of the galaxy depended on it. Palpatine could feel how much energy it cost Yoda to withstand his lightning, and he sensed that Yoda had reached the limits of his strength. Suddenly, the shock of the power blasted them both apart, and Yoda fell a very long way. Instantly when he landed, he fled the chamber, for he knew that he had to escape, and he had no chance to destroy Palpatine. When Yoda made his escape, dropping into the speeder of Bail Organa, he felt deeply wounded, but not physically. The only thing hurt was his pride, and he did not yet understand how deep that wound went. When Mace Windu, along with Aegon Kolar, Saesee Tiin, and Kit Fisto, rushed to confront Chancellor Palpatine, it was one of the final desperate acts of the Jedi Order. Mace felt as though his entire existence had been for that single purpose, to preserve the Republic that he loved so dearly. He had already gone through a profound moment of shock and realization, which I've explained in a recent video. And now, he rushed for one final stand against the Dark Lord of the Sith that had been pulling his strings for so many years. The novelization of Revenge of the Sith provides an in-depth look at Mace's thoughts as he fought Darth Sidious, truly showing his powers in the Force and lightsaber combat. Mace had recruited the 3 other masters to accompany him, as they were some of the finest swordsmen ever produced by the Order. He had deliberately commanded Anakin, the Chosen One, to stay behind, because he knew that Anakin was conflicted by his own fear and would be dangerous, even as an ally. Sidious easily killed the other 3 masters when the duel initiated, leaving Mace to stand alone. Sinking into Vapad, Mace Windu fought for his life. More than his life, each whirl of blade and whip-crack of lightning was a strike in defense of democracy, of justice and peace, of the rights of ordinary beings to live their own lives in their own ways. He was fighting for the Republic that he loved. Vaapad, the seventh form of lightsaber combat, took its name from a notoriously dangerous predator native to the moons of Serapin. A Vaapad attacked its prey with whipping strikes from its blinding fast tentacles. With a Vaapad, one never knew how many tentacles it had until it was dead. They moved too fast to count, almost too fast to see, and so did Mace Windu's blade. Vaapad was as aggressive and powerful as its namesake, but its power came at one great risk. Immersion in Vaapad opened the gates that retained one's inner darkness. To use Vaapad, a Jedi needed to allow themselves to enjoy the fight, to give themselves over to the thrill of battle, the rush of winning. Vaapad was a path that led through the penumbra of the dark side. Mace Windu had created Vaapad, and he was its only living master. The duel against Sidious was Vaapad's ultimate test. As they fought, Sidious moved like a dark shadow, while Windu could be perceived as merely a blur of purple light. Their blades flared and flashed, crashing together with bursts of fire, weaving nets of killing energy in exchanges so fast that they could barely be seen. The Force itself roiled and burst and crashed around them, boiling with power and light speed ricochets of lethal intent. The Force around them was darkening. The Force fed upon Sidious' murderous exaltation, and there was no longer any Jedi restraint present. Mace had cut himself loose. He was submerged in Vaapad, swallowed by it. He no longer truly existed as an independent being. Vaapad was a channel for darkness, and that darkness flowed both ways. He accepted the furious speed of Darth Sidious, drew the Sith Lord's rage and power into his innermost center, and then let it fountain out again. He reflected Sidious' own fury back onto him in the way a lightsaber would deflect a blaster bolt. There was a time when Mace Windu had feared the power of the dark and the darkness within himself, but the Clone Wars had given him understanding, and he learned that the power of darkness was not to be feared. He learned that it was fear that gave the darkness its power. He was not afraid anymore. The darkness had no power over him, and he had no power over it. Vaapad made him an open channel, half of a superconducting loop that was being completed by Sidious. They became a standing wave of battle that expanded to every inch of the Chancellor's office. The entire room might be disintegrated in a flash of red or purple as their blades danced around in a furious engagement. But there was still only the cycle of power, the endless loop. No wound taken on either side, not even the possibility of fatigue. It was an impasse, which might have gone on forever if Vaapad were Mace's only gift. The fighting had become effortless for him, as he let his body handle it without the intervention of his mind. While his blade spun and crackled, while his feet slid and his weight shifted, his mind slid along the circuit of dark power, tracing it back to Sidious, searching for a shatter point. Mace could sense the traces of fault lines in the Force that formed shatter points, allowing him to see how places and beings fit together in the Force itself. He found a knot of fault lines in Sidious' future. He chose the largest one and followed it, and it led him, shockingly, to the young man that had just approached them. The presence was familiar to him. The chosen one was there. Mace leapt for the window, giving himself once again to Vaapad, and he could feel the end of the battle approaching, and so could Sidious. In the Force, Mace felt the Sith Lord become a pulsar of fear. Mace turned Sidious' fear into a weapon, angling their battle to bring them both out onto the window ledge. Sidious' fear made him hesitate, and he was forced to turn some of his Force-powered speed into a grip on the slippery ledge. In that moment, Mace was able to swiftly disarm the Sith Lord, sending his saber tumbling a kilometer below. Now, the Sith Lord, the dark shadow that had fought with such fury, was only Palpatine again.
Mace remarked how the Sith would never be victorious, and that Palpatine had lost because of his own fear. Palpatine, his eyes smoking with hate, called Mace a fool, and asked if he really thought that the fear he had sensed was his, before sending lightning blasting from his fingertips. Mace had no time to comprehend what Palpatine was talking about before he needed to slip back into the pod and angle his blade to deflect the lightning, completing the circuit of power. The lightning simply redirected back at its source. As the blistering energy of the lightning blasted Palpatine, the power that poured from his hands only intensified as he fed it with his own pain. He called out to Anakin for help, and Mace sensed that Palpatine wasn't afraid or even worried at all. He finally understood and felt Palpatine's Shatterpoint, the absolute Shatterpoint of the Sith, of the dark side itself, was that Palpatine trusted Anakin Skywalker. Mace pleaded with Anakin to destroy the Sith Lord, telling him that he was the chosen one and it was his destiny. Anakin hesitated, and the lightning that blared between Jedi Master and Sith Lord swallowed itself, leaving the three of them alone. Victory flooded through Mace's body as he regarded the Sith Lord before him. He moved for the kill, yet Anakin attempted to stop him. Mace knew that Palpatine controlled the Senate and the courts and needed to be destroyed. As he raised his saber and Anakin yelled that he needed Palpatine, Mace wondered to himself why. Before he could deliver the killing blow, the blue blade of Anakin's saber sheared through his wrist, and Palpatine roared back into a lightning bombardment, striking Mace full on. Mace had been so focused on Palpatine's Shatterpoint that he'd never even thought to look for Anakin's. The lightning blasted away his entire universe, and he fell forever.